First of all, Jaya and Stefan, why don't you guys come up here and do this talk for me? That's outstanding. I stand humbled in your remarks. It's just outstanding. So look, when I began my role at Starbucks as the president of North America in 2002 October, little did I know that I would begin my job as a barista, working in a store, making coffee, and experiencing life from the front line. My training store at that time was in my hometown of Rumson, New Jersey, and my experience was wonderful. Besides making coffee and cleaning tables, I was getting my PhD in coffee house leadership. The store itself was very small and it was very busy. Sally, the store manager, oversaw a $1 million operation and helped lead and counsel over 20 baristas. It was during my third day that Sally finally started teaching me the important stuff in running a Starbucks coffee shop. It was not the art of making the perfect latte or memorizing all the customers' names or all the beverages. After a late morning rush, Sally pulled me aside and told me this: Jim, we have over 700 people come through this store on average each and every day. We have a very small store, and it's critical that we monitor and watch every square inch of this 1,500 square foot building. Come with me, she said, and walk through the swinging doors into the back room. Now I'm talking, I said to myself. This is what I've been waiting for. I bet she's going to show me some sophisticated surveillance system or the new La Marzocco that's going to be able to put out lattes in record time, not released to the public yet. There it is, she said. I looked at where she was pointing her finger, and I saw a mop bucket, and a plastic cone that said wet floor. Of all the clutter that was in the back room, and there was a lot, there surprisingly was nothing in front of those cleaning tools. Of all the things you need to learn, Jim, this is the most important. Never, ever let anything get in front of this space. We cannot afford to have any spills or slick areas on our floor. You can't imagine, Sally said, how many Americanos we have to sell to make up for one of our customers getting hurt. Always make sure that this area is clean and clear on every shift you work. I said, okay. Then she said, now, can you take out the trash? So fast forward. From October 2002 to February 2005, I was preparing to take over as the CEO of Starbucks in April of that year. I was conducting an interview with Peter Kafta. He was a senior editor at Forbes magazine. We were discussing the growth potential of Starbucks in China, and we were discussing this in a very crowded store in downtown Seattle. During one part of the conversation, as we were waiting for our coffees, I was making a point to Peter, and I accidentally swung my arms around, and I knocked a tall skim latte out of a customer's hands. I remember that beverage because I had to replace it later. I recall that moment just like it happened yesterday. The latte seemed to float forever in the air. It hung there for at least a minute. I swear it was a minute. Not Joe's minute that turned into like 3 minutes. But then it started to float to the ground. I knew what would happen next. If you've ever dropped a hot beverage with a lid on it, you would know that it will explode upon hitting the ground, and sure enough, it did. But seeing that everybody had backed off upon the explosion, nobody was burned by the hot liquid, I bounded down the steps to the back room. I grabbed the mop bucket, and the cone that said wet floor. Within 60 seconds, that floor was clean, the cone in place, the mop and the mop bucket back in its spot, and the customer was on her way out the door. Wow, Peter said. How'd you know where the mop bucket and the mop were located? I said, Peter, of all the things you learn in this business, or the grocery business, knowing where the mop and the mop bucket is one of the most important things. Article broke. Starbucks incoming CEO knows where the mop bucket is in Forbes magazine. But listen, in every business, in every organization, in every nonprofit, in every team, a sports team, any kind of academic team, there are a million moving pieces. And the front line, whether it be employees, interns, members or team players, know where the priorities are and how to best rank them. And as the boss, the coach, the executive director, or the team leader, you have to ask them about their priorities. They'll be happy to tell you, and you might be surprised that these priorities rank in your top priorities as well. But you have to listen. So where did that understanding come from? And what does it have to do with today? One last story. So I was the last person that Sam Walton hired before he passed away in 1992. Now, Sam was the richest man in the world then. Bill Gates wasn't around. Jeff Bezos was not at his net worth. Carlos Slim. It was Sam Walton back in 1991. And so Sam flew his plane into Phoenix, Arizona. We talked. Laura and I went to spend the weekend with he and Helen, and we did a deal. This was October of 1991. It was January of 1992 where Sam said, Jim, I want you to come with me, and I want you to hear me talk to a first shift of our Bentonville warehouse. Then we'll have lunch, and we'll talk to the second shift as well. I said, sure, I'd love to do that, Mr. Sam. Now, Mr. Sam had on his fanny pack of cancer medication. We didn't know he only had about 5 months left to live. But Sam was closing out the first shift session. Sam goes to get his reading glasses out of his pocket. And out of that pocket comes index cards, pens, pencils, paper clips, whatever else he had in there. And they fall on the ground, and he's weak, and he's fumbling, and he picks it all up, and he puts it back in. He finishes the talk, and he comes over to where I'm sitting. And I said, Mr. Sam, you okay? He goes, I'm okay. I said, would you like me to do the afternoon presentation? He goes, no, let's go to lunch. Afternoon presentation. Sam goes to close up that meeting as well, goes to get the reading glasses out of his pocket, and once again, all the pencils, the pens, the index cards come flying out again. He finishes up, he walks over to me, and he goes, do you get it? And I said, I'm not sure. So hold that thought for a second. Saturday morning, March 11th, Sam Walton, 12 hours from passing away, is on a gurney in his office working. He calls me down, and he rips me about 0.0001/100th on an expense item. I said, Mr. Sam, we just surpassed Sears at $40 billion weeks earlier. I said, Mr. Sam, you got a lot more to worry about than just this. He goes, let me tell you something. He said, one day we're going to do $500 billion. And I knew he was really sick then. Of course, that's what they're doing today is $500 billion. But every penny counts. And he said, one more thing. Don't forget what I told you at that meeting at the warehouse. I said, Mr. Sam, I'll never forget it. So when Mr. Sam was bent over, putting all that stuff back in his pocket, when Mr. Sam loaned Laura and I, in 1991, his 1972 Chevrolet Impala to use as a temporary company car, his point was this: don't ever, ever be bigger than the front line. That's what Sam was trying to impress to me. He said, if you are perceived bigger than the front line, you'll fail. You see, he said, the front line, your front line, is the face of the company. And not only is the front line closer to the customer than anybody else in the organization, but your front line is the last person the customer sees. And I might add, this applies today in this omni-channel e-commerce world that we live in. But I want to give you some quick stats on this. In all businesses that I've ever led, the front line comprises 98% of any organization's headcount. And why wouldn't you want 98% of your employee base energized by having the leader believe in the importance of the front line? And I might add, usually that frontline job is the employee's first job. Well, TIPS has a front line too. They're called interns. And in the summer of 1996, I'd have to guess that the percent of interns was close to over 98% of the organization. And going back to 1996, TIPS had 11 interns and worked with 7 charities. You might have seen the stat here. Last year they had 62 interns and over 56 charities were served. And just as I was a frontline, thank you. And just as I was a frontline employee at 16 years of age, back in 1970, our leader here, our executive director, Camille, where are you, by the way? Where is she? Oh, okay. Our executive director, Camille Renard, began her work as an intern in 1999. And as I traversed several organizations into leadership positions, educated by my frontline experience, so did Camille. After graduating from University of Washington, Camille spent 10 years in London giving her frontline service of giving to organizations like Just Giving, UK's largest online funding platform, and DrinkAware, UK's largest alcohol awareness nonprofit. In fact, many TIPS interns have gone on to lead their own service organizations around the world. And the skill sets of giving back not only started in these frontline positions, or the interns, but also gave and continues to give our interns the leadership skills to accelerate their giving back, placing them in leadership roles at their schools and their communities. This is important to note. There's an author out there, a favorite one of mine, Adam Grant, and in his best-selling book, Give and Take, he says that the best leaders are givers. The most effective leaders prefer to give rather than to take. Givers, you see, Adam says, focuses on what others need from them and endeavor to be generous with their time, knowledge, energy, skills, ideas, and interactions with others. Others being the key word. I kind of was messing around with Camille when I was talking to her about TIPS and what did she want me to speak about. And I said, well, why don't you do this speech? Why don't you have a better background than me? Why don't you do it? And if you did it, what would you talk about? She didn't hesitate. That's what the theme is today. Empowering the voice of young leaders. And then she added, while energizing everyone, that's all of us here today, to work towards a common goal. And that says it all, as TIPS has spent the last 22 years giving to others through the largest piece of their organization, which is their interns. Remember what I said, what Sam Walton told me. Not only is the front line the closest to anybody in the organization, the front line is the last person the customer sees. Here's a true story. In the early years of TIPS, Weyerhaeuser decided to test the value in funding TIPS by seeking out 4 of the TIPS placement nonprofits with a question. Would they prefer to have the direct donation go to their organization or have the funds go to TIPS for the intern's replacement? All of them. All 4 of them stated they prefer TIPS to be funded and that they receive the interns. The power of the importance of the front line. Sam was right. It can make or break your business. Our goal today is simple. It's grow to 80 interns this year, to grow to 100 interns next year, to create a win-win situation with our young leaders and our organizations that we serve, to continue to create a front line that understands the power of giving back. I mentioned Adam Grant earlier. What I didn't mention was that he also talks about in his book that besides givers, there are takers. Takers have a unique profile and they're easy to spot. They like to receive more than they give and they abide by the dog-eat-dog world policy. Takers are a black hole because they can suck the energy from any group or system. And the reason why givers make the best leaders is they have the ability to create a psychologically safe climate where everyone they work with feels like they can contribute. And it's no wonder that Weyerhaeuser discovered the power of giving through the front line. But it's also important to know that while TIPS does want to grow their front line up to 100, over 300, as Joe mentioned, and 600 applications come in for these selective spots. Now, can you imagine? I'll look at Joe and Maureen having a front line of 400 to 600 interns. Nah, I won't go there. I'm going to save that one until next year. Let's get to the 100 first. Let me close with this. When my two sons were at home, and one of them was a TIPS intern, and I still do this today, I give them a reverse Father's Day gift every Father's Day. I tell them in an email to save the card. Don't buy me a tie. Simply read my email titled Reverse Father's Day Gift. And your gift to me is simply reading my thoughts. Been doing this for about 6-7 years now. I call them Jimisms, okay? It's things like always respect those less fortunate than you. Always know how much your mom has made the two of you the center of attention in her life. Give back to those who gave you, coaches, parents, and friends, even if it's a random email saying thank you. And over the years, I add on to this, and of course, I resend it every year, and I probably got close to 75 of these now, and so they never send me a card or give me a tie, so I have to figure that they read them. But I say all that to say this. I also created JD's gift-giving tips for my family. I know Laura's rolling her eyes now, and I want to share those with you today because I think there's great application to tips as we try to create a larger front line of interns that care about others through giving. So here we go on my JD's gift-giving tips. Gift-giving should not be because it's gift-giving season. There should be no boxes to check with regard to gift-giving. Actual time needs to be invested in thinking about what gift to give, backed up by actual observations and by needs. Those who can give more should give more than those who can't. Those who can't give more usually present gifts that are more thoughtful than those who can give more. Those who can give more should learn a lesson from those who can't give more. And finally, gifts should be given that can be used forward into the year and will enable people or peoples to be better off because they received the gift from you. So, Camille, you are a leader and a giver in this organization that does nothing but give. I want to say personally thank you for all the things you've done and all the things that you're going to do. And now I'd like to invite you to the stage to, in your words, help empower the voices, Stefan, Jaya, of our youth leaders, and get everyone in this room working towards a common goal. Camille, come on up, and thank you very much, everybody.